Hi, welcome back. Today, we're going to travel down a new path. So throughout this season, I've been sharing stories that I would call my Wholey Schmidt moments. Today, we're going to hear from a member of our team, and she's going to talk about one of hers. So what is a Wholey Schmidt moment? Well, here's how I define it. It's a moment in your life, makes you stop in your tracks and realize that something really big happened and you want to mine something from it, a learning, a teaching, a good opportunity for growth. Some people might call it an aha moment, but I like Wholey Schmidt better. I hope that this is the first of many episodes where I get to hear from and talk with you about your Wholey Schmidt moments. So I'd like you to meet my friend Cheyenne. Cheyenne has been a really amazing part of our team, helping us with digital marketing. And in our first meeting, I was blown away by what I would call her Wholey Schmidt moment. I'm really excited for you to hear her talk about it in her own words and the discussion, the conversation, the way we connect around it. I hope you enjoy.
If you're lucky in life, you get a lot of Wholey Schmidt moments, and you have had your fair share.
I know. When I was talking to the team about what I wanted to talk about, I left, I think it was a 3-minute voice note, and I was like, this is all the stuff that's happened in the last 3 months. What's the real Wholey Schmidt moment? Because it kind of was all of them.
Yeah. Well, which one do you want to talk about today?
Yeah. So, I know, Sarah, on your pod, on Wholey Schmidt, we've talked about your cancer, and it happened at a really young age. I also, I wasn't technically diagnosed because it's an undiagnosable condition, but I spontaneously went into cardiac arrest when I was 23, and had a pacemaker defibrillator placed, and continued to go into cardiac arrest for 6 years. It was every 3 to 6 months. I decided to go through the process of talking with my doctors about getting pregnant and having my daughter. We switched up my medications, and there's a chance that when you do get pregnant, because of all the blood flow going to your heart, that sometime it can reset your arrhythmias. So my specific heart condition is a variation of an arrhythmia. And in that is where my heart stops and goes into cardiac arrest. So having a pregnancy and going through that process was really difficult and potentially dangerous for me. But with the team of doctors that I had, we decided to go forward with it. Come to find out, I had my daughter, pregnancy went well. I was able to give birth with no issues and actually didn't have an arrest or a cardiac event for over 6 years.
Wow.
And I thought I was healed and it was never going to happen again. And I just kind of almost forgot about it. But I ended up having a cardiac event on a run about 2 months ago. So first one in 6 years, went down being active at a park by myself, was really scared, and kind of hit me that, not that it's back, but that my condition is still here and I still need to live my life accordingly. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts of when you were diagnosed with cancer and how that affected your being and how you related to yourself. Because I feel like my condition was such a big part of my life that it was me. It was all I could talk about. It was all people saw in me. And I had a hard time disconnecting that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Wholey Schmidt. I mean, that was the first thing that struck me when we were talking, like the first time. I thought, oh my gosh, what you've been through. And we really were talking about motherhood and how that kind of transformed you. And I didn't really understand why until you got into the detail around, what happened to you at 22, and then just the miracle that your daughter was and is. And I didn't know about the run a couple months ago. I mean, how scary.
And I think the other part of that, sorry, not to cut you off. The other part of that is I was so scared to be active because that triggered my arrhythmias in the past. And I almost didn't trust my body because it was shutting down randomly during random times. So I had a hard time trusting myself and being active and pumping that heart, because the heart had given out on me in the past. So recently, in the last year and a half, became super active because I finally got that trust back. And for that to be yanked away from me during something that I loved being active was, again, a Wholey Schmidt moment.
I mean, Cheyenne, there's so many points where I feel like you're talking about my story, and it's crazy. I think once you get diagnosed with something that is like life-threatening, it sticks with you, right? It becomes part of your identity. And I felt the same. I had the same thing where I would like meet people and I would struggle with how to talk to them about normal, like everyday things, because I'm a cancer survivor. I had cancer kind of narrative running in the back of my head. And it was kind of the only thing if someone said, "Who are you?" I would say cancer, for a long time, because it was so consuming. Like yourself, I didn't know why I got it. There's no reasoning like you did this, therefore you got sick. You ate too much sugar, you got cancer. It was just like, it just happened. It was sprung upon me one day at a time in my life where I wouldn't have expected that to happen. And so I became suspicious of almost everything, as a potential cause. For me, the treatment of cancer can cause cancer. So that was like a whole nother mind fuck,
Yeah.
because I had all this radiation, and then I started developing issues with like skin. Like I've had basal cell carcinomas removed from my neck. I actually have a chunk I have to have taken out right here, and I've been avoiding it for like 6 months because I'm trying to figure out how they're going to get a chunk out of this. There's nothing there. I'm like, it's a bone. What are you going to, I've had some cardiac issues come to find out that a lot of people who have the kind of radiation I had at the time I had it can develop issues with valves and even can need valve replacement. So like about a year ago, I went through like all this cardiac evaluation stuff, which was like super scary, because there I am on the treadmill doing like a like one of those, I forget what they call it. It's like a stress test, walking on the treadmill. I'm sure you've had a million of them.
They actually have only done one because I just died. I just like,
oh my God.
Out. So I'm not really allowed to do that.
You can't. I don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry.
I know you have
there's the irony in it all, right? I remember getting on that treadmill and that belt that you put around your waist, which hooks all the electrodes in. It was set for somebody much larger than myself. And then they kept cheering me on that I got to 10 minutes on a treadmill. And I was like, what the hell do you think I do all day? It was really, really strange. I had a cyst in my breast, and I was recommended to go see a breast specialist. And she came in like guns blazing and said to me, if I were your doctor, I would tell you to have a double mastectomy immediately.
Wow.
And then I found out that like I had an 88 or something like that % chance of developing breast cancer prior to age 40. But I didn't know that. And I was 50. And I had missed like the window. But if you make it to 50, then the chances go back to like a normal person chances. And she didn't understand the nuance of that. And for like 4 days, I walked around in the world trying to find a second opinion, thinking I had to have a double mastectomy and coming to terms with that. I mean, I've got all these you can see all the sunspots all over. That's from radiation. I mean, it's also from sun and the fact that I'm a fair-skinned person, but it makes my skin like really sensitive. I have a lot of issues with my neck. It looks, so taut. I feel like a giraffe some days, but it's tight because of radiation. It changes the tissues in your body, and my neck is just tight and it hurts all the time. My neck and shoulders. When I go to get a massage, they're always like, what do you do for a living? Like talk. Anyway, yeah, it lives with me. And there are days when I feel like it defines me. Now I'm 30 years away from it. So there are more days that it doesn't define me than days that it does. But like when I'm really stressed and my neck starts to really hurt, I mean, I remember why, why it's extra sore, or when I run into the dermatologist twice a year, or when I make my every 6-month visit with the cardiologist, like I can never get too far away from it, I guess is my point. And so what I've really had to do is make a kind of peace with things that are not peaceful. And that for me is like the daily task of like choosing this. It is my struggle. It is my path. I cannot veer from it. So I'm going to choose it. And I've actually gone as far as to begin to talk to myself about how can we choose to actually love it, as opposed to like resist it, be annoyed with it.
I love that. I've spent so much time being angry because it felt like it took so much away from me, especially, and I'm going to get emotional again.
Oh, I will do it right with you, okay? I promise.
Just because it felt like it took so much away from me in my 20s. I was 23. My friends were still going out all the time. They were able to ride bikes and be active. And I always wanted to jump out of a plane and skydive. I'll never be able to do that. And that's something so silly, but that was a dream of mine that got taken away. Surgeries, MRIs are a pain in the butt, like spending hours and hours at doctor's offices. It just felt like it took so much away from me that I really appreciate you switching that and saying, no, let's be grateful because of all these lessons that we learned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all emotional just hearing you because my 20s, like, they were so hard. And I had so much resentment toward myself, toward my body. I mean, in the podcast, I talk about the way I separated kind of my head from the rest of myself, like my head became almost its own being, just hating on my body. Mm-hmm. And I had always been really critical, I think, of my like physical self, just sort of trained, as most women are, to be very critical of ourselves. But it went to like such an extreme place that I literally hated it. And I don't really have like a day when all of a sudden when I wanted that to shift, but I do recognize a period of time where I think parenting, where I became super clear that all that hatred I had toward my physical self, there was no way I was going to be able to hide that from my kids, and I was going to just hand it to them. That was probably the shift, when I recognized like now I'm a mom and they're watching me and they are absorbing everything. And I have all this negative energy directed at myself. I'm teaching them things I don't want them to learn, and I think that's probably when I started to really shift that narrative. I mean, but there are days when it's still really hard. I mean, I have this scar. We're going to talk about tattoos, but I have this scar. It's 11 inches down the middle of me. And right before I turned 40, I got so fucking sick of looking at that scar every day. I couldn't stand it. I hated it. It was an ugly scar. I mean, scars are never really pretty, but it wasn't like a plastic surgeon stitched me up, And I tattooed the whole thing. I have this beautiful tree of life. It's gorgeous. And I have a bird for every kid, a little bluebird. And I'll tell you, tattooing a scar is a very cathartic experience. It hurts.
Or just taking that power back, right? Like I didn't trust my body at all. And I, again, to your point, I hated it. So why not reclaim it and make it mine?
And make it beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And like name it, right? Claim it. Like, and for me, the tree was like a way to reconnect with it, And so now when I get in the shower, I see the tree, right? I don't see the scar. And actually tattooing the scar tissue completely broke it up and the scar almost dissolved and you can hardly see there's actually a scar still there, which was like a benefit that I had no idea might occur.
That's beautiful. And what you said about motherhood really, this might be a segue to a full different conversation, but I do think it's all intertwined, especially talking about, birthing a child and your body did that and kind of reclaiming that. But the whole process of almost reparenting myself through my daughter and seeing how I speak to myself is something that I would never say to my daughter. So why do I say it to myself? And that has been the biggest learning lesson overall. And I'll share another part about that is I actually had a nose job in 2020. So it was after I had my daughter and I had it scheduled. I hated it my whole life, but I was trained to hate it because a girl in middle school made fun of me all of middle school for it. So it was something that again, like you said, I saw it in the mirror and I hated it. So I decided for myself that I would do it. But then something popped into my head when I woke up. What if I change the nose that my daughter's going to have? And it was a full psychological, like, I don't want her to think that I think she's ugly if she has that nose that I hated so much. And I had to really work through that.
I mean, I feel like parenting has been such a gift to me, each one of them. But for me, the experience of birthing my son, I was 44 when he was born. I mean, there were a whole bunch of really amazing coincidences, right? So like while I was laboring, I was just wandering because it took like 39, for God's sake, hours, it was I was induced because they wouldn't let me go over my due date because I'm old and all these things. And, so I had a lot of time to walk and I was walking the halls and I would pass the hall of the cancer care center where I used to go for radiation while I was laboring, getting ready to birth him. And I say this in the podcast, I walked in as a cancer survivor and I walked out with an infant. And the experience of birthing him, I had gotten very connected to my physical self prior to his birth. And I had started working out and training hard. And I loved being strong. And I was loving my body. And I was feeling much better about it. And I was seeing all the things it could do. But that was still for me more about like being fit. Being fit and sort of for me, being fit was a big fuck you to cancer, right? It was still like an act of resistance, it wasn't acceptance. But birthing him was like this true opportunity for me to accept that my body actually was really quite capable, to really accept that it was both flawed and amazingly capable. And that was like oh my gosh, that was just the moment for me that I was unpacking for a really long time. And then I nursed him and I was told that I probably shouldn't be able to nurse him because of the radiation, it affects your breast tissue. And nursing was like, oh my God, such a thing. I really had to work at it. Lots of pumping, lots of coconut oil and supplementing and all this stuff. And, but I nursed him for 17 months. Wow. And that was the beginning and the end of me feeling like this body was less than. Because now I have to look at him. I don't have to. I get to look at him. And it's this physical representation for me. And what am I going to, he's perfect. He's amazing. He's exquisite. So therefore I must be too, right? And if I'm going to shit on me, then I'm just shitting on him. So it's been like this, a daily gift that I challenge myself with.
And the one thing too, to that point is that no one ever told you that when you have kids, I guess what I'm trying to say is people prep you to have kids, you just have to take care of them. Yeah. Like you're going to have this baby, you're going to take care of them and you got to teach them everything there is to learn about life. And you got to let them fly the nest and they're going to live life on their own. But at the end of the day, the one thing I didn't realize is that I learn more from her daily than I'm sure she learns from me. And that's like the biggest mind fuck, if I can say that.
Yes, you can. You can.
like
Yeah.
like no one ever prepped me for is that
No.
daily I'm a better person because of her, and I keep thinking, oh, I should have done this before I had her, or my life would be this way, I should have taken these risks before her. But the only reason I'm even working with you, Sarah, is because I had her, and I think that that's so beautiful that she gave me that gift.
Yeah. What I've come to appreciate is, I mean, our kids are born like perfect, and they know everything they need to know, and their instincts are like completely intact, and their little souls are like spectacularly aligned. They're their most authentic selves, right? And then, the world happens to us, and then we spend a bunch of time trying to come back to that. And so I think they do gift us with this opportunity to see who we are in our essence, right? Our core, I truly believe that like he is a representation of my best self, at times when he's just being who he is. I'm not saying like he's me, but you know what I mean? Like I see that, like how does one be their best, most authentic self? Watch a 2-year-old,
For real. It's like 2 to 7.
Yep. Just watch them. Just do what they do. Love like they love, view the world the way they do. Walk around in the universe just like they do. We had our kids in Montessori school, a Montessori preschool. We had this like wonderful Montessori teacher who used to encourage us to take a Montessori walk with our kids every day. This was excruciating, Cheyenne. I mean, because if you go walk down a sidewalk with a 2-year-old, with no agenda, you will get nowhere. But that was the point, because we had to stop to look at every ant, every piece of bark, every leaf, every flower, touch the grass, taste the grass, sit in the grass, and that was excruciating for me because I didn't know how to be present. My whole life was built around distracting myself, right? Getting away from the sensory, because the sensory stuff for me was so triggering and painful. And, my kids invited me back into that.
And I love that. I need to stop. It's like what stop and smell the flowers, right? Like we all need to stop and slow down and smell the flowers, because I feel like as a society, we're so taught to push and push and push and go and go and go. And that's a great reminder for me as well, because sometimes I get so caught up in the day to day.
Tell me about what your community looks like today, that helps you, like 2 months ago when this happened, it must have I can only assume it was pretty earth shattering, right? So tell me about that.
So I have a really great group of girlfriends that I surround myself with, and they were the first people I texted outside of my husband. And it's interesting. How do I put this? This was 6 years is a long time. I have people in my life now that weren't in my life 6 years ago. So it was so interesting to see how those different groups of people, the ones who knew me before and the ones who knew me after, reacted. I have a tendency to make light of things that are very serious instead of talking about my real feelings. So I kind of played it off like it's fine. It is what it is. I'm okay. It'll be okay. And then a week later, I completely broke down because that fear was back of, okay, I can't trust my body. It's going to happen again. I have found this love of working out and moving my body that I didn't have before. And I was so scared to do that again. I was scared that that was one more thing that this was going to take away from me. And I broke down to my friends and my husband, as well as my mother. I have a lovely mother who I think was more scared than I was, to be honest, when I told her again. And really just let loose of those feelings. And the one thing that my mom actually said to me is that it'll all be okay. This is your path, like you were saying earlier. And it doesn't have to identify me. It's not everything that I am, but it is a part of me, and that's okay.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, you've heard my mom talk about this, and having those people that you can really lean on. I mean, regardless of how long you've known them, it's everything, I think. Because this is a very lonely path. That's my experience, at least. Yeah. You know, it's really, truly like this was my experience, and people can relate to it. I've met 2 people in my life who had the cancer I had at the time I had it, you know, in their lives, which was extraordinary to talk to them later and hear their stories. And I felt like, oh my God, I can't believe you're out there. Because when I was going through it, there was nobody who was 20 years old, you know, at the cancer care center that I saw. Right. And so I figured everybody just died. I'm laughing, but I did. I really just thought everybody died who had it. So now to have people in my life who really, really want to understand and are really patient about kind of how hard this can be sometimes is everything.
Do you still have relationships with those people?
So there's a woman so one of them is a neighbor, which is crazy that we were like on a walk one day, and I don't even know how the conversation came up. And it was like, oh my God, she had Hodgkin's, I had Hodgkin's, she was in college, I was in college. Hers was like a different stage and her treatment was slightly different. But so I see her from time to time. And then another woman is, I heard a podcast one day when I was doing research for this podcast, and this woman mentioned her cancer, and I ended up Googling her and getting her book. And then, you know, in the flap, there was an email or something. I don't know, maybe I found her website and I emailed her. She lives in California. She's a little older than I am. And we Zoom, you know, from time to time. For her, it was just as impactful as it was for me. She had never talked to anybody we had so many similarities in our experiences. That was huge, because I connected with her right around the time I turned 50, which was really hard for me because, I don't know, you think, oh my God, my life is half over. And for me, I always think maybe even way more than half. You know, I don't know how much time I've got left. I do really live feeling like there's a clock ticking. I just have maybe just a different awareness of like, how much time do we have? I mean, I'm sure you can relate to that.
100%.
Yeah.
And that was my next question for you is, you know, how do you take that, and how did that change the way you live your life? Because I changed completely.
You go first.
So when this all happened, so I was clinically dead for 12 minutes. I went into a coma for 7 days. I was on life support. They weren't sure I was going to wake up. And when I woke up, this is a funny story. The first thing I asked for, and I couldn't talk because I had the ventilator, so I wrote it down because no one could understand me. I said, I want a fucking Sprite. And that was the first thing that came out of my mouth. I had no idea what had happened. And then I asked my boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband, to marry me. Because to that point, I didn't know how much longer I had to live. They didn't know if it was going to happen again. I quit my job, went to Southeast Asia for 3 months, and covered my body in tattoos because I always thought that was going to hinder me. But at that point in my life, it was like, this is what I want to do. It aligns back to that alignment conversation, is I need to align with myself. Let's get aligned and live life, because you don't know how long it's going to be. Your turn.
I think I wish I had a better story. Like I went to Southeast Asia and covered my body with tattoos, you know, I mean, because I did get a tattoo, a little tiny one on my ankle, which is now a much bigger one. And then it became another one and another one and another one. And actually in July, I'm going to tattoo most of my back. And I'm planning one for my shoulder. You know, I was on this path of putting so much pressure on myself prior to getting cancer. This like perfectionist in me that couldn't make a mistake, you know, and had to do everything right. And after the cancer, I doubled down on that for a while, which was really, I made life harder for myself because I was struggling to believe that this cancer wasn't a punishment for not being good enough. And so I wanted to prove that I was good enough.
That breaks my heart.
And I just kept trying so hard. And when you feel that you're not good enough, there's nothing you can do. There's no act that you can do that compensates for it, right? But I was searching for the act. So I was going to be the best aunt, the best partner, the best daughter, the best sister, the best everything. And I just was trying to prove that I wasn't cancer. And there was a time where I think that just broke me. And sometimes it still does. But more days rather than not, it doesn't anymore. And I look at my life and see my children, my family. Oh, I got to be with my mom over the weekend because my son graduated from high school, which was an amazing feat. He's a kid who has had a very non-traditional life. My son, who I adopted, and I think now my life is mostly defined just by gratitude for all these people that I love and that love me, and this voice that I've found that I feel like has some value in the world, this story that I hope can have, like, this kind of thing can happen, you know? I mean, this is like exactly what I hoped would happen from this podcast is I would connect with other people who just want to go deep and be real.
What do you think was the shift that shifted from the perfection to gratitude? I struggle with the perfection side a lot, so I'm curious to hear kind of where that shift or what you did for that shift.
I think it probably has, again, a lot to do with parenting and how I didn't want my kids to drive themselves the way I drove myself. You know, I wanted them to be able to connect with what they truly loved, understand what made them truly happy, have a sense of what their purpose might be from one day to the next. And I lived my life for a long time without that, or the answer was always to prove, to demonstrate, to show, you know, it wasn't to be. And I could see it in my parenting. And I think that probably is what pushed me to step outside of it, because I didn't want to do the same thing to them. I also think, you know, I made some big mistakes. You know, I fell kind of hard. Things kind of fell apart. You know, I got a divorce, right? I made a big mistake and I got a divorce. And I had to sit with that, like, reality. You know, I was an adult who made some decisions and I had to now deal with the consequences. And, you know, that was a great manifestation of the fact that I wasn't perfect and I didn't have to be, because I couldn't be, right? Because I wasn't, you know, and settling into that and also recognizing that that also didn't define me was a really wonderful gift. I don't know. I think it's a day-to-day thing, you know? I think when you live your life a certain way for a long time and when you have all kinds of things that have happened to you that are challenging, you make daily choices, right? I'm going to wake up today. I'm going to choose gratitude. I'm going to choose this life I have. I'm going to love these challenges I'm experiencing. And I'm going to take a step. But for me, it's very much that, like, daily decision.
That's so helpful to know that it is a decision, because it sometimes feels like it comes so naturally to people. And I just struggle with refocusing into that gratitude. I do my best. I'm journaling, trying to align myself in the morning. But it's, again, I'm not happy you struggle with it, Sarah, but it's nice to know that it is still a choice every day.
Yeah, I don't know anybody for whom it isn't, because I can't imagine, as if we're all human beings living full lives and having shit thrown at us all the time. I don't know anybody for whom that's not true. I don't know anybody. I don't think we could find anybody who would tell us that it's easy. I don't have to work at that. There's a lot of things I do not have to work at, right? It is easy for me to get to the gym in the morning. It is automatic. It is easy for me to choose healthy food day in and day out and treat this body really well. But that piece, the mental piece, that sets the tone for everything, is a daily conscious decision. I think that people who make it effortless are probably working the hardest at it, is my guess. I don't know. I may be wrong. We should just keep talking to people about it, I think, and find out.
Yeah. I'm so curious.
And we don't talk a lot about this kind of stuff either. Like, tell me about your toughest moment and how you got through it and what you learned and, what you wish you would have told your younger self. But that's where it's at for me right now.
I love it. And I love hearing about it too. Like doing this back and forth with you, I feel like I've learned so much that I'm now going to use in my day-to-day life. So thank you for sharing.
I feel the same way, because you and I have talked about things, and I discovered some things and said some things today that I don't know that I didn't expect to say them, and I didn't know they were in me. Like, that's the gift you gave me. I'm curious, if you could go back and talk to 22-year-old Cheyenne, who's coming out of that coma, knowing all you know now, what would you say to her?
Here we go. Honestly, it's that, you are strong enough. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of been the theme for all of my Wholey Schmidt moments, I think, at the end of the day, is that the universe has your back, and it wouldn't give it to you if it didn't think you were strong enough. And I think there were so many moments where I wanted to give up, especially after the coma. To be completely frank, give up on life. Why is this a life worth living for me? Because so much was taken from me. Mm-hmm. And that's really morbid, but it's true. And I think at the end of the day, if I could talk to her like you asked, it would just be like, it's going to be okay. You are strong enough.
Mm. It's beautiful. That message of you are enough is one that I will recite in a mantra-like kind of way to myself a lot. You're enough. And that is a real gift I think I give myself now that I couldn't a long time ago. Cancer felt like it made me so much less than. I felt like it set me back. It robbed me of, right? Mm-hmm. It took away. But to know that I'm just enough, just like the way I am today, showing up with you, and I think is one of the greatest gifts I can give me.
And I think what's beautiful is you're telling yourself that. I used to need it from outside validation.
Well, somebody suggested I say it, if that helps you.
So, I love it.
I didn't come up with that on my own.
Because I need to I need to remember that me telling myself is enough. That's like full circle, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the best, is when you actually remember that you should say it to yourself, right? Because that's like such a loving act, And it's kind of hard some days to be really loving to a physical self that has really let you down, and been through so much and been traumatized and not treated so lovingly, right? The experience of being sick and being in that sick care system that we both found ourselves in is not a loving, tender experience, right? So we're almost having to kind of work against that too, which is just an added level of challenge. And, yay, take it on. Because what choice do you have?
Exactly.
I don't know did you know, I love to work out. I mean, the heavier I can lift, the happier I am.
I've got a place. It's new. It's a new love for me, but I don't feel like you're saying it's automatic in the morning. I don't feel great unless I do it.
I don't either. And it actually has made me mentally strong. So I started working out because I wanted to look good. And yes, it helped. But what it has done for me is when I do something hard in the morning that is really, really hard, that I think I might not be able to survive, and I do that for 45 minutes or an hour, I am so mentally prepared for all of the hard things that are going to come at me during the day. And I can reflect back on, well, if I deadlifted 180 pounds or whatever I did, or if I squatted that trap bar 90 times like I did on Friday, not shitting you, 90 trap bar squats. Okay, I could hardly walk on Saturday. But if I can do that, then choosing gratitude, right? Or saying you are enough, or, is so easy in comparison sometimes, right? It sets the tone for me. And sometimes it takes that. Sometimes it takes 90 squats, to get my mind right.
And I think just for me, it's getting out that excess energy in the morning helps me not run myself rampant through the day because my thoughts spiral from the stress.
Well,
so
when you push yourself physically, it quiets the mind, right?
Yeah.
And, I have a busy mind. I have a busy head. There's a lot to quiet. A lot of voices in there talking all the time.
What makes you so wonderful, Sarah?
It's what makes you wonderful. Cheyenne, this has been such a gift.
Thank you. It's always a joy, truly.
Oh my God.
I honestly love speaking to you on or off the podcast.
Amazing. Oh, thank you.
Thanks,
right.
Sarah.
So it's until next time.
Bye.
I'm so glad you listened today. And I just want to really call out Cheyenne for her courage, her vulnerability, her decision to open up and really explore this really big, big moment in her life. And I'd like to invite you to do the same thing. We'd like to hear about your Wholey Schmidt moments. We'd like to do a lot more podcasts like this. We've got a little tool on our website where you can tell us about your Wholey Schmidt moment. So we invite you to do that at WHOLEYSCHMIDT.com. And please take the time to tell us what you thought about this episode. You can do that on Instagram. You can put a comment on YouTube. Please consider following us wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks again.